Have you ever noticed that one day you simply answered differently? You didn't react. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't apologize. You didn't even realize you changed until after it happened. What if that's what healing actually looks like? I don't think healing is becoming someone new or a better version of yourself. I think healing is finally becoming safe enough to be who you've always been. Hi, everyone. I'm Donna from Wild Moon Healers, and today we're exploring the Aquarius Full Moon. But instead of talking about, manifestation or astrology, I want to talk about something much more personal. I want to talk about identity, because I think this full moon asks one of the most important questions in healing. Who are you when you're no longer surviving? One of my favorite things about the Aquarius full moon is where it falls. It arrives in the middle of summer. This is a time that's naturally about building, doing, growing, moving forward. This is waxing energy, momentum. But Aquarius asks us to do something different. It asks us to pause, to reflect and to recognize what has already changed. I often describe this moon as bringing a little winter into the middle of summer. It teaches us how to pause when we need to. In Wild Moon Healing, there's this map, and summer represents growth and momentum. Winter represents reflection and release. Summer is waxing energy. It's about action. Winter is waning energy. It's about stillness. And this Aquarius full moon invites us to practice both at the same time. Life doesn't just stop because we're growing. Even in our waxing phases, we get triggered. We feel defeated. We lose confidence and we can become stuck. Growth doesn't protect us from being human. And this full moon reminds us that healing isn't a decision. You don't simply decide to become more confident. You don't wake up one morning and just stop apologizing. You don't promise yourself that you'll never over-explain again and suddenly become a different person. Healing happens much more quietly than that. Over time, you begin catching yourself in moments that used to pass unnoticed. They passed so fast you didn't even realize you were triggered into a reaction. Healing rarely happens all at once. It comes through small changes in your behavior and your words. It shows up quietly. Maybe you recover faster after a hard day without a drink. Maybe you say no without rehearsing it first, or even feeling bad about saying it in the first place. Maybe you laugh more easily, or you stop needing everyone to understand you. Those aren't random moments. Those are signs that your nervous system is changing. And that's why I love this full moon, because I think its message is incredibly simple. Your nervous system may have finally become safe enough to let the real you emerge. I kept thinking about Leo while writing the corresponding blog. We're in Leo season, which is often associated with confidence, expression, being seen. But while writing the blog, I couldn't stop picturing a lion wrapped in a blue blanket. I know, it sounds a little strange, but stay with me. It's not roaring, it's not performing, it's not proving anything. It's just relaxing. And at first I thought it was strange. Why am I seeing this image? And then I realized that image wasn't about Leo energy at all. It was about healing, because healing doesn't diminish your strength. It gives your strength somewhere safe to rest. That's what nervous system healing looks like. Power that no longer needs to prove itself. Safety that cools hypervigilance. The Aquarius Full Moon teaches us something we rarely practice. It teaches us to wane while the world waxes. While everyone else is pushing and building and doing more, this full moon quietly asks, can you pause long enough to notice how far you've already come? Can you recognize the version of yourself that's beginning to feel more familiar than the one you spent years protecting? Because awareness always comes before transformation. I'd love to leave you with a few reflections. So as you hear them, notice which one your body reacts to first. Do you still apologize for existing? Do you recover faster after difficult moments? Do you trust yourself more than you used to? Do you feel safer being seen? Are you discovering what actually lights you up? These aren't personality changes. They're signs that healing is happening. Healing doesn't always announce itself. Most of the time it whispers, like love. Healing speaks softly. It speaks through the boundary that you didn't rehearse. The opinion you no longer needed, the reaction you no longer had, the laughter that comes a little easier. Maybe this Aquarius full moon isn't asking you to become someone new. Maybe it's simply asking you to notice who you've already become. Because your authentic self isn't something you create. It's what's left after your nervous system no longer needs to protect you. If today's message resonated with you, I've linked the companion blog below, along with a link to my Awareness Changes Everything journey. This is where we practice the ideas in this message, just one small step at a time. So until next time, keep looking forward.